So hello and thank you for joining us today. My name is Matthew Olson, Product Marketing Manager here at Tintri. I'll be your host kicking things off. We have some great content lined up for you featuring DCIG's research analysis and findings, Tintri VMstore feature overview and a live demo, followed by some additional time for Q&A towards the end. The webinar itself will last approximately 1 hour. A couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees will receive a copy of the DCIG report that we're going to discuss today, likely later in the week, along with an on-demand link from the webinar itself. You can submit questions via the Q&A feature on your Zoom platform, or if you wanted to just submit a comment, you can do that through the regular chat. And a little bit of background about the title of the webinar today. Tintri is running a summer campaign called the Data Disruptor World Tour. Tintri is a touring rock band traveling the globe conquering data disruption. So as such, we'll focus on why Tintri took center stage in DCIG's Cybersecurity NAS Report for 2025. And without further delay, let's get the distinguished panel introduced. So first we have Ken Clipperton, Principal Researcher at Data Center Intelligence Group, or DCIG as they're more commonly known. Next we have Brock Mowry, CTO of Tintri. And last but certainly not least, we have Lou Melagrana, CTO of StarNet Solutions. So Ken Clipperton, I will pass the ball over to you and we'll get started.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. So DCIG, first, who are we? We conduct informed third-party analysis of products that go into the data center, focused on storage, data protection, and cloud technologies as well. So we're an independent analyst firm. And our independent research, we mostly bring to market or publish in the form of our DCIG top 5 reports. And one of those is the foundation for today's webinar. We recently updated our independent research into network attack storage solutions because first, many organizations are making fresh buying decisions with purchases expected to nearly triple over the next 7 years. And also because the providers are offering more and more cybersecurity features to address the evolving threat landscape out there. And through its independent research, DCIG identifies what we regard as the best 5 products for any particular use case in our top 5 reports. And this webinar came about because Tintri's VMstore earned a top 5 spot in the 25-26 DCIG Top 5 Cybersecure NAS Solutions report. And this is for systems capable of supporting more than 10 petabytes of capacity. We evaluated 24 solutions that met our inclusion criteria that are shown on this slide. Now, the Tintri VMstore achieved that recognition based on its overall capabilities, but we called out 3 features in particular because we feel they're especially significant for large-scale deployments in today's cyber threat environment. And those are the way that the VMstore optimizes workload performance for multiple hypervisors. Again, I think everyone should be aware of the dynamics with the VMware marketplace because of the recent licensing changes. Its secure VM snapshot and fast recovery capabilities, and also its workload awareness and the impact that has on rapidly identifying issues that need to be resolved and getting them fixed. That's it. Next.
Go ahead and on to the next slide. There, perfect. So I wanted to start with a VMstore platform overview. As you can see across the top, the VMstore supports a few different types of workloads. We started out supporting virtual machines. We do a very good job of managing performance and enhancing the data management capabilities around that. We then extended into SQL databases, and recently we've also introduced support for persistent volumes in the container environment. Off to the left-hand side, you can see we have a control plane product called Tintri Global Center. This allows management of multiple of the data planes. And then moving over to the data planes, you can see we've got the physical appliance, which is the VMstore 7000 series. So we've got a T7040 through T7080. tailored sizes to be able to fit all customer environments, no matter the scale. As well as we've got some virtual and cloud products, so Tintri Cloud Engine as well as Tintri Cloud Platform. So touching on deployment options, this flyer that you see here is in the top of every one of our boxes. It's a very simple deployment. I think the most difficult part of getting this appliance up and running is actually mounting the rails, depending on what rack system you have. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. As a matter of fact, I came from the customer space. We had a challenge, the marketing team had a challenge during that time that if you ordered a pizza and the pizza showed up before the system was up and ready, they'd actually pay for the pizza. Unfortunately, I never got a pizza.
It actually takes longer to get the rails in than it does to get the system up and configured.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We try to make it simple. You can see we've got color-coded diagrams for network connections. Very simple setup. It's basically apply an IP, set your password, then jump over to the screen, get on the UI, and finish the deployment. So we try to make it quick and easy to start realizing value of the product, and as painless as possible to start running. So some of the other deployment options that the VMstore has is, again, we touched on the fast and simple deployment, but we also are able to be deployed in highly secured environments. So the architecture allows us to be able to do offline upgrades, and by offline upgrades, I mean be able to download the upgrade package, transport it into a highly secured environment, and then be able to deploy it into that environment without a dependency of an internet connection. We also have a pretty rich call-in capability, a phone home solution that does support some of our analytics and other features that we feature within the product, but that's an opt-in service. You can actually disable that at the product level, and then again, being able to be in an entirely isolated environment from a data and compliance perspective. So like I mentioned before, we do have a control plane called Tintri Global Center. Tintri Global Center gives us the ability to manage multiple of the VMstore systems to be able to achieve some pretty large scale. We'll touch on those numbers a little bit further ahead in the solution, but it allows you to manage multiple types of workloads in one place. So whether it be a virtualized application that's hosted across multiple virtual machines, a Kubernetes persistent volume or database type solution, or even a Microsoft SQL Server solution, this can all be managed. You can do all kinds of wonderful cloning, data protection aspects, all within one simple platform.
And I wanted to comment that, the way Tintri VMstore reduces storage management overhead through its autonomous policy-based real-time tuning really impressed DCIG's analysts. And it's especially important at scale because manual tuning doesn't scale. And then the combination of the real-time analytics and the full-scale visibility, that's a powerful combination for rapidly addressing any performance issues that do occur.
Yeah, that's critical. A lot of the stuff we put in, our clients really like that because somebody makes one small mistake, they can throw the network to quite askew, and a lot of people don't specialize in that. So this really looks at each virtual machine and actually delivers performance to them where it's needed without really having to ever go in and touch it.
Yeah, so to extend the conversation a little bit further, around capacity and performance efficiencies. So, Ken had talked about the autonomous management. So we do have auto QoS happening at the file system level on all of the VM stores. That ensures that each workload that gets placed on us gets the best possible environment to perform in, as well as it eliminates noisy neighbors. So we are able to track and identify every IO that happens on every workload, and we have that granular management. We actually have a graphic coming up that'll kind of illustrate a little bit better of what that looks like. But we are aware of these workloads. So not only do you attach us as a storage interface, but we also have another aspect of the product where we attach into the management side. And on the management, that means we're actually through APIs communicating with the platform, whether it be VMware, Microsoft SQL Server, or even a Kubernetes cluster. We understand what's going on in the environment to a degree that allows us to be able to better manage the workload on all of the systems. So we have a better together type solution for all of those different platforms. So to touch on a little bit on the scale side, I mentioned before that the Tintri Global Center control plane can manage up to 64 VM stores. If you're looking at the 7080 product, which is our largest line, that can support up to 480,000 workload objects. So if it's a virtual machine, if it's a Kubernetes persistent volume or a database, as long as you stay under the 480,000 limit number, which I think is going to be a pretty safe bet, it can all be managed in one space. That cumulative adds up to about 47 petabytes. So I think we're well within the 10 plus NAS qualification for this adventure. But
That's right.
we're able to do that all within a 2U rack unit, totaling out to about 128 rack units. So call it 4 racks total. That's a pretty large amount of workload within a very small amount of space.
So Brock, what is the minimum unit of scaling for a VMstore environment?
Yeah, so you can actually deploy just an individual VM store. We'll take the 7040. That's our smallest unit possible. You can sell that, or we can sell that with just a minimum of 10 drives. So it's 9 active drives with 1 spare. And then we have some pretty cool technology that allows us to add 1-by-1 drives. So you could deploy the single VM store at that initial disk level. As your environment grows, maybe you don't need Tintri Global Center to start. You can do everything directly on the VM store. But then as your scale and your requirements grow, add in Tintri Global Center. It's a virtualized application. Once that's in place, add in your second VM store. You can then start scaling out the disks on each individual platform. And like I mentioned, you can get all the way up to 64 VM stores under that management. So we can start very small and rapidly expand out.
Very good, thanks. That's another unusual capability, that granularity at which you can scale out a solution.
Yeah, the other thing too is we focus on the individual workload as far as management and administration. So if you want to take a snapshot of a virtual machine as an example, or a database, we only snapshot that individual object. We don't snapshot the entire environment. As well as replication. We only replicate exactly what you're talking about. Well, that granularity can become challenging at scale. And that's where Tintri Global Center and service groups come into play. So we have some pretty unique ways of identifying those individual workloads to put them under a single policy and be able to apply things like QoS or data protection with snapshots and replication and so forth. So we're able to manage a lot of those individual tasks at a very large scale.
Excellent.
So here's the graphic I was referring to before. The VMstore's file system has a pretty unique architecture. You look at the competitive landscape on the left-hand side, all those different colored blocks represent an individual workload. They're all fighting and create contention in order to get in and out of that volume or that LUN. That can be problematic. And again, your management or administration is at that larger bucket level versus the individual object. Moving to the left side of the graphic, you've got different types of workloads. We've got Kubernetes persistent volumes, virtualized applications or in virtual machines or the databases. Those all have their own unique disk, vDisk queue, which means we can manage performance as well as administration at a very granular level.
And that's one of the things, Brock, that really makes the Tintri VMstore different from a lot of products, is the way that you guys actually can manage them. You don't have these virtual machines fighting for channels to get space and IOPS and so on. You guys actually take care of that. Some of that stuff we spoke about before with auto tuning, it works really well.
Yeah, and from my experience as an IT director in higher ed at 3 different universities, the idea of predictable latency for each application can be huge in a meeting service level agreements, but also avoiding tech support calls and the wasted time of troubleshooting, resolving, and then reporting on, okay, here's what happened, here's how we resolved it, here's how it'll never happen again. So that predictable latency that you can get out of the solution is huge for, again, just efficiency of, and again, at scale, that makes a bigger and bigger difference.
Yeah, and the auto QoS is definitely key in enabling all of that, but also don't forget, we're able to do policy-based or even individual tunable QoS. An example I like to give is you got a junior developer that, may be working on a SQL server that you absolutely do not want to impact anything else in your environment. you can actually apply a QoS policy that puts a ceiling on that individual workload. And now if that guy inadvertently sends out a select all statement on a SQL database, it's not going to take your entire storage infrastructure down. It'll be limited to what you provide to that environment. So able to build in those types of performance protections very simply. So some more information around performance management is really comes down to our UI and the data that we're able to not only provide but also report against. So we have some very unique insights into the workloads that are over top of us, and we'll see a little bit ahead in a demo that I have. We have some default columns for the data that we present around the workload. So, latency, throughput, IOPS, so on. But there's a multitude of other areas that you can open up, and I'll actually show you a bunch of the available features. We've boiled them down to our default setting, which we found is the most critical for an operator to be able to understand what's happening, but there's a deep amount of information. And one of them we go really deep in is on the latency side. So for example, within virtual machines, you can see down to the individual vDisk or the ESX host or even the network to see where this latency is coming from. And that gives you the ability to rapidly get to root cause. So, my past, I came out of a service provider environment. We were always at fault whenever there was a performance issue. So it was on us to be able to rapidly define where that issue is coming from, get the right teams involved to be able to investigate further and ultimately resolve the issue for the customer. So my teams found this very valuable, that they could go to the actual machine that the customer was complaining about, with a very simple hover over, understand, hey, this is latency that's coming out of the network. We need to grab the network team. It's no longer a bunch of finger pointing, a bunch of guessing, maybe it's here, let me test here. Very concise information to be able to action on. So that was something that we appreciated. I know Lou's shaking his head. I'm sure he uses it quite a bit as well as his customers. But that kind of visibility is just, it's not seen within other products in this industry.
100% correct. Yep. 100%.
Yeah. One other thing too is I'd mentioned before that we do have a opt-in call home feature. Part of that call home data that comes back is performance metrics and details about the workload. And any customer that's has a active support entitlement has access to one of our SaaS-based platforms, which is Tintri Analytics. And Tintri Analytics looks at multiple aspects of that workload, gives you an output that you can not only predict where your workload's going from a performance and capacity perspective, you can do that all the way out to 36 months, but it'll also give you a what-if analysis tool. So if you have a changing workload or you're expanding your environment and you're getting ready to set up a DR data center that's a part of your infrastructure, you can go in there and make mock scenarios. So I'm going to add 250 databases or 250 virtual machines. You can actually tune what that profile looks like. Maybe they're heavy hitter databases, so you can put a large database instance as an example, or they're VDI desktops. Hey, what happens if we add another 250 desktops to our environment? Or we want to remove this VMstore and put it in another location to distribute our workload. How does that impact the workload at this site? So those what if tools give you the ability to model off of your data. This isn't synthetic data. This is actually from your uploads and your trending information. Gives you the ability to get that insight of, hey, if I make this change, this is going to be the impact. Or if I add this workload, this is what the change is going to require. So we find that very valuable. We get great feedback from our customers on that capability.
And just make a quick comment on that, Brock, is that we actually put Tintri against 6 other vendors, and the analytics and all that were actually in the end, not only on top of everything else, but that was the thing that said you guys had that nobody else could do. And that actually drove the actual customer to finally go into Tintri. And that's been maybe 8 years now. They've been using Tintri ever since. And that was coming out of a much bigger company's storage system that was very used a lot and popular. But when they saw the Tintri and they saw the analytics, that just literally, the CIO was like, this is unbelievable. I've never seen so much. We're like, yeah, that's what we've been telling you. And they went ahead with it in the end.
And again, from my experience in IT leadership, when a business leader comes to you saying, we want to implement this application, and need to be able to tell them to know what's the impact going to be on our infrastructure. Can we load that up, get that going right? And what's that timeline mean that I can commit to them then? How quickly can I get that? Because usually when they had come to us, they'd made their decision, they'd made their selection, they wanted to move forward. But to be able to say, yes, the infrastructure will support that we have right now, or to be able to identify, here's what we need to purchase or get into our infrastructure in order to support that application. Really big for the relationship between IT and the business leadership. You don't just want to be the no people, right? The just say no.
Absolutely.
That's not a good path.
Yeah, this is also very important to kind of service provider market as well. In my past, I couldn't tell what kind of workloads were coming my way. Enterprise is a little more predictable, but when you got a sales guy out there trying to sell big deals, you never know what they're going to bring in. So being able to model that workload and understand it while it's still in a pre-sale stage from a service provider perspective is huge, because you're constantly managing capacity and performance management throughout the life cycle of the product. So having those kind of tools are extremely valuable. All right, so I wanted to step into a little bit of data protection and cyber resilience capability. So the VMstore's really got a unique snapshotting and data protection capability, and snapshotting is really the core of it. That's the number one thing that once we get a system implemented with a customer is get snapshots going. There's been some conversation in the past around how snapshots are not backups and how they have performance impacts. This is a completely different architecture. So our solution will allow up to 128 snapshots per managed object. On top of that, we have a pretty unique way in the way that we take the snapshots. That metadata that makes that snapshot up is actually in a space of the operating system that's not accessible by end users or by bad actors, if you will. Some other solutions, that's the number one thing that gets attacked in a cyber event. So we have a unique capability in that we're able to store those in a place that's basically inaccessible. We've got some other features that we've added on top, and we'll step into that a little bit further. But snapshots are really the foundation. That's the number one thing that I look for when I'm analyzing customers' systems, as well as post-implementation. I tell my SEs, hey, don't leave that site without snapshots running and active. Tie that together with Tintri Global Center. You can apply a policy. You can do snapshots at the entire VMstore level, or you can do it at the individual workload level. But that's the core requirement. And like I mentioned before, you don't have to snapshot an entire volume of workloads. You can snapshot the individual object that matters to you.
And I think it's important to say that the snapshotting in Tintri is way different than what people are used to in snapshotting or checkpoints and other hypervisors, because I know you're going to get into it in a bit, but the difference is night and day. You're talking about taking a snapshot in a second on something that's terabytes or larger that otherwise would be running for a while and people would be waiting on. So they wait till maintenance windows to do that or so on if they need to, unless it's an emergency. But yeah, it's an incredible technology. It works fantastic.
And this is one of the reasons that DCIG called out the snapshot capability as one of those three outstanding features, even though people could say, well, all the enterprise solutions can do snapshots. Well, yes, but this is different.
Yep.
And superior. Different.
Oh, 100% different. We do all kinds of storage, but Tintri is the main go-to for virtualization, and the snapshotting it's 100% different. People don't realize until I show it to them. I did a live demo on LinkedIn. I took a 10 terabyte server. I snapshotted it in a second. Then I cloned it back in a second. And then I cloned 30 of them in I think it was 8 or 10 seconds, and right back into VMware. And, people thought it was some pre-made video. I'm like, no, this is live. This is how it works. It's just the technology is way beyond what most people have ever seen, I think.
Yeah, one of the ways I was able to leverage snapshots in the past is we had a highly secured hosting environment. We had a couple of customers that were in the financial industry, and they wanted to be very aggressive about security and specifically penetration testing. Penetration testing can be extremely disruptive to applications and ultimately the business. So we sat back, we looked at the application that was in place, the architecture, worked with the customer, and actually came up with a plan where we were able to snapshot and clone their entire environment into another space. make that space exclusive to just the pen tester, he was able to then come into that environment, go wild. He could do all of the testing and be as disruptive as he wanted to be because it wasn't the actual production systems. However, it was an exact duplicate of the production data. It was an exact duplicate of the applications and the versions that they have. And it was the exact duplicate of all the servers. So he was able to go in and do real world testing, pull all his results, submit his reports, send an email back to us, and we could completely eliminate the test environment in seconds. So we ended up productizing that a little bit and creating some scripts around it to make it very simple. And all we had to do was receive an email from the customer, run the script against their environment. It generated all this, send the details over to the pen tester, and then tear it all back down when he was done. It became a very painless process for us as a hoster, and it was completely enabled by VMstore snapshots.
Yeah, the snapshotting is ridiculous. We had a customer who was in demo mode on a Tintri, wiped out half their file server, called me up while I was in the car asking to help him restore through his backup. I said, that's going to take hours. And so we put the Tintri and we took hourly snapshots. I said, we can go back to the previous hour snapshot. We can restore it. He's like, I've never done it. I'm like, it's all right. I'll walk you through it. I walked him through it in the car in 30 seconds. Server was back online, and the snapshot recovered in 1.2 seconds. We booted up and off he went. He still had the old server if he wanted to look at it, but we actually cloned off the snapshot to a new one. We've had more than one customer who've been affected by ransomware. And although backups are great, and we always encourage people to have them, the snapshotting on the Tintri, and I know Brock, you're going to get into it a little more, but we've recovered entire environments just using the Tintri when everything else was down, especially in a ransomware or such a, an attack like that. It's worked flawlessly. I mean, we've never had a failure. So it's nice to have that confidence in the product too.
Yeah, the other really cool thing in that scenario is, if you have any type of an incident like that, you immediately take a snapshot of the system. You can preserve data there for later investigation, but then you can work with the customer and understand where their last known good snapshot is. And we provide some metrics that can kind of show that, especially in ransomware, because encryption has a very unique fingerprint within our metrics. So the first one is, a loss of data efficiency. As you're encrypting that, we can no longer dedupe and compress that data. So we see that data growing rapidly. Then the other side of it is if it's a virtual machine, that virtual machine's processor is processing that encryption workload. So we have kind of a top CPU or top activity list in our UI, and those VMs always shoot straight to the top. So we're able to then go in, kind of get an understanding of where that timing happened, look at the metrics, you can kind of see the ramp up, and then go and look at where the snapshot timing is and say, hey, this right here was the snapshot that was just prior to all this happening. And we can restore just that snapshot. And the really cool thing about the architecture is once we restore that snapshot, we don't lose the history. We can continue to restore off of that one. We can still have the one that's later in time. There was some slides from earlier, like when I was a customer that used to tout you could time travel with the VMstore, which is 100% true, because you can restore those snapshots from any point in that chain with no risk of that chain collapsing down to whatever that time frame of the last restore was. So it gives you a ton of flexibility and a bunch of peace of mind. All right, so once we have snapshots established, snapshots can live on the individual VMstore that they're taken on, but we also have a couple other capabilities, which is asynchronous and synchronous replication. So asynchronous is probably the simplest to set up. Once you have two VM stores in an environment, if they're under management from TGC, which is not a hard requirement, you can have two independent VM stores participate in an asynchronous replication. But we'll most commonly see it under a single Tintri Global Center architecture. You can very quickly set up a policy that says, I want to take a snapshot of this workload and I want to replicate it to this remote VM store. That policy will kick in, it'll make sure that it's replicated. And the other really cool thing is we are dedupe aware, so we're very efficient on that WAN link if you're transferring data over to, say, a DR site. We only transmit the individual system or workload that you're actively working on, but we also, in addition to that, only replicate the unique blocks that are required in order to complete that data set on the remote side. So very, very efficient. Another area is around synchronous replication. It's a little more involved, but yet still kind of simple compared to some of the other solutions on the market. This is where two VM stores can actually participate together in a high availability solution. So they're able to take snapshots and replicate them at a very, very high rate. Obviously, there's some bandwidth requirements in this type of architecture, but what this allows you to do is really business continuity within this architecture. So that's how you get those multi-9 type uptime solutions sitting on top of a VM store architecture. All right, so here's another feature I was kind of hinting towards a little bit earlier on. It's an enhancement that we've recently released around our multi-factor, around our snapshotting capability. This is multi-factor snapshot locking. We had a couple of challenges come back from our customer. Said, hey, that's the immutability story around your snapshots is great, but my CIO really needs to see this feature. So we ended up going and going back to the drawing board, kind of looking at our architecture, seeing how we can achieve this, looking at some of the use cases that we had. We had some pretty unique scenarios. People that are running VM stores on boats that can't exactly pick up a phone and open a support ticket, as an example, or have limited internet connections. And we really needed to come up with a solution that allowed us to enable this extended security, but still work within the confines of the solution. So what we ended up finding or coming to a solution on is a snapshot locking capability that ties back into our role-based access control. So one of the first things that you set up is two different roles. We have a data protection admin as well as a data protection escalation admin. And these two roles are kind of like a dual custody situation. Both of them have to agree in order for an action to take place. So what that entails is the data protection escalation admin can do no changes. They can't create snapshots. They can't lock them. They can't create policies to do that. They can only provide an escalation. And then the data protection admin can't provide escalations, but can only configure and deconfigure locking snapshots. So now you have that situation where, similar to a bank vault, you got to have two keys and both of those people need to agree to open up that lock in order to take action. So it fulfills that scenario where you're out on a boat and you can't put in a support ticket for a third party to be that second key, and provides the added peace of mind in that not only are the virtual machine snapshots or the workload snapshots protected and secured, but now there's another layer of human intervention for them to be acted upon.
Well, this is great, Brock, because if you have, your retention period is expiring and recovering from ransomware in a large environment, I think you'd mentioned this at one point, is that it allows you to lock those snapshots before if the retention period expires, you can still maintain those. It also gives somebody who's been hit with ransomware, if you have snapshots during that period, to go back and use them to actually do investigation if you need to. A lot of the places we're working with, they won't pay out the insurance until they actually see the machines that were affected now. They want to actually see what's going on and require to submit them, as opposed to, well, we got hit, pay us. Yeah, we've seen a lot of change in that. So this is great.
Well, and again, it is a robust VMstore security features that, again, help to earn the solution, a top 5 for Cybersecure NAS solutions. This multiple approvers for critical actions, that's what we call it in our research. That's a newer capability, but yeah, it means that if one administrator's account gets compromised or they get tricked into trying to take an action, this second approver is an important, again, stop gap, or keeping, to keep the bad things from happening. So really, really good.
Yeah, some other things I can add there too is, the VMstore does run on a hardened operating system, and we are also in some government approved agencies already. So we are able to meet some of those requirements around high security, air gapped, FIPS, all of that stuff. We can check those boxes. All right, let's jump into a demo. If you give me a second, I will put up a screen share. I just need to rearrange some windows on my side. Try to be quick about it.
So while you're doing that, just to say, to put this out there, because most people probably don't know who I am, but I originally was a Tintri disbeliever, if you will, and I was actually humbled very quickly by what the box could do. We had a customer who was continually having problems. There was 10 of us on the call almost every day trying to resolve it. And once the Tintri box came in, and I thought, oh, here's another product that's not going to do what says it can do. We see this all the time. We took out a bigger box provider and we put this in. And after that day, there were no more 10 people calls every day. They actually went away because one person could open the Tintri, and you could actually, what Brock's going to show, is you can actually see pinpointing where the problems were immediately without having to have 400 conversations about what happened. When was it? 10 minutes ago or 8 minutes ago, 7 minutes ago, and then trying to get everybody to agree what happened. But yeah, the box is absolutely outstanding. I love it.
So jumping back over to my screen here, we are looking at a Tintri Global Center instance. So I'm gonna put a disclaimer out here. This environment is in my tech marketing lab. We do some really crazy stuff on the back end here. So you'll see some pretty interesting alerts if I go into that area. You can see there's alerts signed up here. This is an area where we go and pull cables and verify that things are actually functioning the way they're supposed to function, as well as demonstrate that for customers. So looking at Tintri Global Center, this instance happens to have two 7080s under management through it. And what you're looking at here is a common screen that we have not only at the top of TGC, if you will, but also it's the main screen within the VMstore or starting point. So we want to give some good heads up metrics here as to what's going on throughout the estate. So here you can see we've got about an aggregate of 55K IOPS. Down below that, it's a little bit smaller text, but you can see a 7-day range. We've done anywhere from 52 to 56. We've got some synthetic load testers running in here and things just kind of generating some activity. You can also see throughput stats. So this is ties back to the throughput of each of the controllers that are active on the VM stores, as well as we've got the overall latency of the solution. And when you hover over this, you can get into a little bit more detail. So you can see we've got about 0.1 milliseconds of latency coming out of the network, as well as 0.2, and that's going to kind of average down to 0.2 overall. That's why you see the summary up here. You can see a total of 0.3 down below. This last box is flash hit ratio. This was actually for some of our legacy products. This will probably be going away in the near future. We used to have a hybrid architecture that was really, really cool. I was a customer of that product, where we were able to tie spinning disk and all flash disks together. We've since elevated the solutions to all flash, and those hybrid systems have since aged out. So you'll start to see this kind of stuff go away. The next area I want to touch on is performance reserves. So performance reserves is a really great way to get a quick heads up view of, hey, can I deploy a new workload, or do I need to go and do a little bit of investigation? And the way I like to relate this back is the performance reserves kind of like when you go to the doctor. One of the first things they do is they take your temperature. Taking your temperature doesn't tell him that you've got an infection that's causing your body temperature to elevate, but it gives him an indicator, hey, something's wrong. So if you come in here, you see you got 86% free performance reserves. You can pretty much deploy any application or any workload without any further consideration. However, if you do start seeing that creep up into the only 20% free, I would recommend definitely taking a little bit of a deeper look. You may need to add some additional capacity or performance into the environment. Again, this is an aggregate of 2 VM stores that are sitting below. If you have up to 64, you're going to see this aggregated up at the top as well. Then across the bottom is around capacity information. So in this environment, we got 47 TB free. We've got about 190 gigs of Tintri snapshots. Then we've got about 10 gigs of live data, 10 terabytes of live data. And then we also have a small partition over here with a couple hundred gigs in it. This is an area that we use within our systems to run the databases that can do all this fancy data, have our operating systems and some supporting files. So we try to keep that as minimal as possible. We want to maximize the amount of usable space to a customer on their system. So these are always going to be pretty small in the overall scheme of things.
So Brock, as long as you're talking about capacity, again, the report highlighted solutions that can manage up to, beyond 10 petabytes of capacity. What's the largest supported file, directory, or volume in a Tintri VMstore environment?
So because our roots come out of VMware, we kind of try to align with VMware's max file size. So I think that's around 64 terabytes at the moment. We can do up to about 500,000 files, but we have a unique architecture with the VMstore that can actually change some of that. So some people might be scratching their head going, man, I've got 3 or 4 virtual machines that exceed that count. Well, the VMstore file system was actually designed to host file systems. And what do I mean by that? So within VMware, as an example, you're running a VMDK. Well, inside that VMDK, you have a file system, and that file system has its requirements. So we want to make sure that we're able to meet those requirements, but also support what we call large files and shallow file systems instead of bushy file systems like you would see within those VMDKs. So it ends up being a little more efficient, gives us the ability to host multiple workloads that then have a very large number of files on them.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, so I want to take a deep dive or a deeper dive in here, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to click on this Managed Objects tab within the Tintri Global Center, and here's where we can see a whole bunch of different workloads. And if I move this little annotations that I can see on my side, we've got about 72 managed objects, so 72 different types of workloads running within this environment, and it's a mix of VMware virtual machines as well as some persistent volumes for container workloads. And I believe there is a SQL database in here as well. But from here, you can really quickly see what's going on. You know, we've got some dormant systems that are in here. We've got some clone systems that are sitting there as registered but not actually running. And then we can actually see the performance around them. So we can see if there's some that have high latency. Again, that wonderful pop-up box looks like that system sitting on a host that's got some good contention going on it, that's contributing to the overall latency. But we can also come in here and really quickly sort and find, hey, you know, this workload up here is the one that's really driving the I/O within this environment. With that, we can double click on this and drive straight down into the individual workload. This happens to be one of our synthetic load generators called Tingle. Anybody that's been playing with a VMstore for long enough knows exactly what Tingle is. This is one of the applications or virtual machines that we used to use in our operation to burn in systems. We would leave one of these running for 24 to 48 hours, and it's just sitting there pounding the disk for you, so you can make sure that everything from host to network to actual disk is running the way that you want it to. So here we can see we're doing about 40,000 I/O, almost 500 megs of throughput, and then we're doing it at a 0.3 millisecond latency, and again, looks like some of that's being driven out of network, very little driven out of storage. And then we can see some physical capacity information. We also provide infrastructure detail. So what system is that actually running on? What is the VMstore or the vCenter in this instance? But we can also go in and look at some deeper metrics. And this really gives you an idea of what's going on with that workload. Like I mentioned, we have a bunch of different data points that you can look at. So here's an example. You know, right now we're just looking at IOPS, but maybe we want to look at what the latency has been over that time period. You know, how does it impact performance reserves? And then across here, we can actually change the time frames that we're looking at. You know, what does that look like in the last hour or the last month? And then across the bottom, we also have sliders that give you the ability to then fine tune what that data point is that you're looking at. So those will all tie back together. You know, maybe you have a spike and you want to see how that spike correlates back to latency or performance reserves impact. So very granular, very, very deep observability into what the performance of the workload is actually doing. You can actually tell which VMstore it's running on. That's also very helpful. Then I want to jump back over here to settings as well. So I mentioned before through Tintri Global Center, you have the ability to create service groups, and service groups are logical groupings of workloads, and then you can apply policies to them. Well, I also mentioned you can do them one-off at the individual workload level. So you're able to come in here as an example and either tie it to an existing snapshot policy, or you can create a custom one. This one happens to have one that gets snapshotted it looks like at 5 minutes past the hour every day. It is not in a locked state. It is a crash consistent snapshot versus an application consistent snapshot. And then we have some RPO, RTO information in here that'll fire out some alerting if there's any kind of delays or any issues with that replication.
Can I say something real quick, Brock, while you're doing this? Just to
Go for
remind
it.
everyone, the one thing with the Tintri, with the auto tuning that I've never had happen, and I don't know if it ever could, but to be honest, between whether you're snapshotting, restoring snapshots, cloning, or you have machines that are taking more ops, all these screens give you all that information, but never running into the instance where a SQL server is pounding the disk so hard that everything else starts to slow down. Never a scenario where mail server, file server, or something goes awry and it's just beating the death out of the system. You don't have that in the Tintri world. I mean, you can go in and manually tune it if you want, but the intelligence inside the box will take care of that all for you. So we don't get those calls from customers like, oh, the network's really slow today. Oh, somebody's snapshotting the SQL server and it's taking forever. We don't see those anymore. But if you ever wanted to see the analytics of what is going on, you can see that in all these screens that Brock's showing right now. It really has incredible insight.
Yeah, and our very first exposure at DCIG to Tintri was when our founder was at a tech conference and included a visit to a data center, and there was Tintri infrastructure there, and he'd managed significant virtual infrastructures before. He was shocked at the number of workloads that were being run on a single Tintri appliance, and the minimum. I mean, they had it may have been 100,000 VMs, but it was tens of thousands of VMs that they were running in their environment, and they had one administrator managing it. And he said he only spent a part of his time dealing with storage. I mean, it sounded like a minimal time. Yeah, it was the kind of the key highlight coming out of that whole tech conference was that how scalable in terms of performance and management the Tintri solution was.
We took out 2 full racks of a big company, won't mention their name. We put them into 2 Tintris of 2U boxes, everything. We reduced racks. We took 13 racks of servers, moved them down to 2 Tintris that ran in 4U worth of space.
Wow.
It was faster. It was better. It was easier to manage. It was not difficult at all to get done in the end. And the customers, like I said, thrilled to this day. They love it.
Yeah, and anybody managing data centers, reducing down a rack or even a rack a half of power is a significant cost savings. So that definitely can relate back to that. Another area too, we were talking about the auto QoS. It's been my experience, let it do its thing. The only time that we really applied policies were to cap the amount of IO. We really never put any types of minimum requirements. We let Auto QoS handle that. It did a great job of it. Putting a cap on it allows Auto QoS to kind of do its thing as well as limit those individual workloads. So that was my personal experience around it. Setting up snapshot protection as well as replication and QoS, that can all be driven from a service group policy. This one happens to be one-off. You can see we've got a couple of configuration settings in here, but it's pretty simple to be able to go in and apply these changes and ultimately start managing the workload as you need it. Another area, so we're looking at a single virtual machine, but you can see that there are multiple disks on this virtual machine. This one happens to have a disk on SCSI 01 that is the one that's driving all the I/O, but there is a secondary disk on here that's not doing too much. It's probably just the OS disk in this situation. But you can see a granular breakdown of the individual workloads. If there's multiple disks on here, you can tell which ones are actually driving the workload for that individual virtual machine in this instance. Another area is look at snapshot inventory. So you can see we've got a couple of them here that are performed from the policy here for hourly scheduled. Looks like we had a test during the Geek Out. That's another webinar that we put on every month. One that Matt organizes for us, does a great job, and Matt Hebb also does all our graphics around it. So please go and check that out if you have a chance. But again, you can quickly see here from inventory, and like we mentioned before with the snapshot locking. So these don't happen to be locked, but we've got a column here that shows you what the locked option or state of that snapshot is. Then last one is if you are running policies, sometimes they conflict in the way that you architect your policy infrastructure. We want to give you feedback at the individual machine level or workload level to tell you, hey, you got a problem with this policy. There may be a conflict that's stopping this one from taking place. Here, we don't have any policies applied, but this was where it would show up and let you know that there's any kind of conflict so you can resolve it and be able to rest easy to know that, things are being snapshotted, things are being replicated as desired. So jump back out of here a little bit. I'd mentioned before, this is our default set of columns of data that we show. We found that this is kind of the most important data to the administrator. So we wanted to present that straight out of the box. But if you go over to this gear icon, this gives you the ability to really, dive deep. We got storage capacity under space. We've got protection. We've got things from an administrative level, some advanced details. You can add these at will and build a whole, mile-long scroll across the bottom if you want, or, I tend to keep it right here at the efficient level and then drive into the individual workload to see those additional details.
It's safe to say, I think you covered every single detail anybody could. To be honest with you, there's so many, and people don't even realize they're there because this screen is liquid. It's just gold. This is just gold for people to see this data. It really is.
And another thing too that makes it really efficient, managing hybrid type workloads. So you've got containers, you got databases, you got virtual machines. Well, here we can see this screen's pretty much dominated by virtual machines, but I know there's some Kubernetes volumes in here. Boom, there you go. These are my Kubernetes volumes, persistent volumes that are tied back to an application. So you can quickly filter down to see the different types. Maybe, hey, is there a SQL? Yep, we got a test 4 on here, so we got a SQL database. Or you remove that, and you can see all of the workloads. So very powerful filtering. So again, quick information at your fingertips that's actionable. Another area I want to go into is a little bit more detail that we built for Kubernetes. So again, we're at the global center level, so we can see everything that's in the estate. I know in this architecture, I've only got one Kubernetes cluster tied to one VMstore, but if I had multiple, they'd all be listed out here. So you can see we've got this dev cluster attached. I can see that I've got 2 deployments. These are actually remnants from another demo that I do around rapid deployment of Kubernetes applications, a little bit of cloning and data protection, as well as being able to clone that workload out and duplicate it. So it could be a workflow like maybe there's a ransomware attack, or maybe you're just doing a normal dev cycle. You need to cut off a copy of that website and transition it over to an updated copy. You can go deeper too. You can see pod information. You can see what containers are running in those pods. Again, all of this is drillable, so you can see even more detail and perspective. But the other really cool part, and we're getting great feedback from Kubernetes administrators, is the observability that they have over the performance of these workloads. So not only do I see I've got a persistent volume claim here that's tied to this persistent volume, but I can actually click on the volume file, a volume link, and this will take me back to the manage objects to that specific workload. And now these are kind of dormant web servers, but now we can see the individual performance stats, the data protection. You can see this one's got a snapshot on it. That's actually how the other cloned one was generated. But very quick actionable details and performance information for those systems. Same thing around databases. We can see different SQL instances, the databases that are listed there. Then one of the last areas I want to touch on is the actual VM stores themselves. So we've been looking at the high level, the control plane management level. What about the individual VM stores? So we can see we've got 32 managed objects on this one, 47 on the other. Obviously, this one's got a lot more capacity free on it. This one's driving a lot more IOPS, so maybe this is your production box. This one's a DR box, as an example. But you can quickly heads up see how your VM stores are being utilized at the actual appliance level, and then drill into those individual appliances. So this is the main screen of an individual appliance. Like I mentioned, it's similar to the global center in that it's got your IOPS, your throughput, and your latency. Your performance reserves and your space detail, but then we also have some things that are particular to this VM store, like replication state or Kubernetes clusters. Actually, if I click over to this one, we'll see there's a Kubernetes cluster attached to it down here with the deployments. Got something, Ken?
Yeah, I do. I'm wondering, Lou, as we're looking at all this stuff and for, someone responsible for infrastructures, uh, when you're talking to executives or business executives, prospective clients, and, what do they ask about your experience supporting customers? And when does the light bulb moment happen for them, uh, when they see the VM store demo?
I get really excited talking about Tintri legitimately because it works really well. These guys know they've seen me kind of get very animated.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, very animated. I mean, one of the things is that, I mean, the box was spawned from, originally from VMware. The one thing that has done tremendously well with our customers, it's probably the only box, actually it is the only box that we'll put in that can not only do virtual servers, I could do VDI in the same box. I don't need separate shelves. I have a very easy management. I just show them the interface on the box and I tell them how
Uh-huh.
long it takes me to set up. And I tell them even my help desk guys have gone in to do these without 2 weeks of experience of how to rack it and stack it. They love it. The fact that they've added Kubernetes into it. And I know Brock and his team have done tremendous work on that to bring this in. It just expands it. So basically, even if your box did not have the Kubernetes option, but you're in the 7000 series, your software can be upgraded to now support it. So these boxes have a good lifetime on them. You're not ripping them out, replacing them. If I have a 7000 already and I bought it before the Kubernetes option, now I can just upgrade it and add the Kubernetes option. The fact that it can do basically for SQL databases, what it can do for virtual machines and snapshot and cloning and so on. We
Uh-huh.
actually, a customer legitimately bought a Tintri just for that feature. They had a complete SQL outage. They were out for 72 hours. I said,
Oh.
why did you just use the Tintri? They said, what do you mean? I said, well, there's a function in there you can use. We showed it to them. They said, great, we're moving everything to the Tintri. Get us another one. We want to run it there. I said, you don't have to, but they did. So for us, really, it's really the analytics have sold. For our bigger customers, they love the analytics. Nobody provides that. The amount of workloads you can put in such I don't want to say a small box, but physically a much smaller space you
Yeah.
can take. And it works great. No more LUNs and volumes and calculation, because the reality is if you put a piece of storage in today and you calculate your volumes and LUNs for all your servers and you figure out which ones go where and so on, within a year, 2 years, 3 years, even 5 years, you're changing servers, you're changing disk size. Those things, they all have to be basically recalculated to run efficiently. And people get tired of that. And it's a nightmare and people usually let it go and it gets inefficient. So the Tintri takes care of all of that. So it really doesn't take long.
Mm.
Usually it's one meeting and off they go. They love it. They
Wow.
really do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to jump over into a different screen. You kind of prompted that for me here. So under our hypervisor manager section, and we're going to be updating that to workload. There's some legacy naming in here, but you can see we support not only vCenter but Hyper-V, Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization, Zen, as well as Kubernetes clusters, and as well as OpenStack. So we've got some pretty interesting stuff going on with OpenStack and Platform 9. So keep an eye out for some announcements around that. But also we can support more than just one. So here's an example of where we've got two different vCenters attached to a common VM store. And that really enables some pretty unique workflows and capabilities. So you can actually snapshot a virtual machine in vCenter A and not without even having to replicate, you can clone it directly into vCenter B. Gives you a lot of really cool flexibility around workflows. So you can rack up multiple platforms and be able to do operations between those platforms.
Can I say
Very
something about
good.
that real quick? We have customers who, some of them haven't been so happy with the Broadcom situation, so they're moving possibly to another hypervisor. A lot of our government has they've moved to Hyper-V and so on. But the Tintri, I have multiple abilities, but multiple hypervisors, so I can slowly start bringing things off from one to the other without having to build an entire new data center with things and so on. So it really helps. It's flexible. It works fast, and I've been told, well, it's the hardware. They must buy faster hard disks. No, they don't. Because even back in the days when they did have the older systems running spinning disks, I was outperforming full flash systems on some of their biggest competitors.
Wow.
And yeah, we actually had people, if you can show me that yours is faster, I used to tell people, I'll give you my house. You can have it. So just come in, and nobody ever beat that challenge. Thank God. And nobody beat that challenge, but that just shows me how confident we are in the box. I mean, we
Right.
literally, just love these things. We can do upgrades. I don't say to do this, it's normal, but we can do upgrades in the middle of the day with no disruption. And I don't mean if you have 1 or 2 servers, I mean a full-on data center, SQL, mail servers, files. We can do them in the middle of the day with no disruption. They don't even know unless we tell them. So it really is an amazing box, and I get super excited. I'm trying to keep myself calm right now because I have a tendency to get a little animated.
And
So,
I know we're at the top of the hour. Is this webinar going to automatically cut off at the hour mark, or can we keep going?
No, we're okay.
Okay, great.
all right, so I just want to hit 2 last screens before I jump off of here. So in our hardware tab of the individual VM store, we give you a nice, call it a physical view of the system. So you can see this is a 19+1 system. We'd mentioned you can buy these in various drive configurations. You can also see detail about the network port connection. So, we're doing something kind of bad here. We don't have redundant admin ports in our lab. We're doing that to be a little more cautious on our port consumption. But you can see here on our data ports, they're fully redundant. You can click on them. It drives even more detail. We're actually pulling CDP or technically LLDP information straight from the switches, so you can get details about that. You can also see if, hey, A is down, but B is, or sorry, A is up, but B is down. Gets you very detailed information about it. And then I wanted to jump over to the other one, same hardware tab. And you can see this is actually a smaller capacity system where we only have 10 drives in it. So it's a 9+1. So we keep an online spare. But again, we have the ability with this expansion estimator where, I've got a change coming up. I need to add some more capacity. What is the impact of adding 1 drive or 4 drives so that you can get an idea of where your final capacity is going to be once you add those drives in. So again, adding some value around trying to estimate and understand that, you can be a little more cost conscious and size to what your exact needs are.
Yeah, and that brings up it reminds me of another piece of why we thought this was a superior platform, and that is that a cluster, as it were, an environment, a data environment, can be, and with Tintri, composed of machines from different generations, right? Different capacities and performance levels, so you can, to a degree, tune whether for storage capacity or for performance based on what your actual needs are. Unlike some environments, which every node that's going to participate must be close to identical in configuration. This is much, much, much more flexible. And think about owning an infrastructure over time to be able to expand by disk or by, okay, I need to get more performance, just add another appliance, or and the tools for estimating what you're going to need. I think that's really significant.
We have several generations of Tintri running in my office. Some should probably be removed at some point, but we actually can manage them all, even if the operating system is different. And I don't mean one version off, it can be several off. We have several customers who've done that. As you said, as you're moving forward, you don't have to shut down and replace. The other thing that's really important with the Tintri that doesn't typically happen is they have the ability to add as little as 1 hard drive to expand the system, or as many as you like to fill capacity. You don't have to put a tray, a half a tray, another head, none of that.
Right.
You just fill it as disk one at a time, which has become really good because our customers don't wind up having to buy a half a tray of disks when they just need a small amount of increase. And people love it too. They really do.
So we got, I think, 2 more slides. I wanted to touch a little bit on our technical support and services. As Lou alluded to, we don't really have a PS org. Our appliances are pretty simple to put in. We do have some very complex engagements where customers want us involved. We can definitely help, or we can leverage partners like Lou to get involved. So that's something that we definitely enable. But we do have a 24/7 365 support org. We've got an L1 and an L2 group. These guys are fantastic. So they're able to handle, prioritized by severity responses around the clock. So, one of the other things that I like about our system is very proactive. Actually, could you advance the slide? So right here is an idea of what our severity levels are, kind of what that definition is in the SLA response. But the kind of the gold on this slide is that bullet point down at the bottom, or the starred asterisk. 90% of our cases are actually opened by the VM store itself. As long as you have that call home enabled, we will let you know. And a lot of times we let you know before you even know. I'm sure Lou's got a couple of examples of that coming up here. But, in addition to that, there's a 95% SLA success rate. We're obviously very proud of that. I'm pretty friendly with a lot of our L2 guys, even the guys over in India. I get to wake up in the morning and kind of chat with them. How was your day, which was my night, and these guys are just great. They want to solve problems. They have extended knowledge outside of the product. So a lot of our customers experience that. Hey, we had a problem, but it was ultimately an issue with our switch. We're not saying that we're going to fix your switch problems and diagnose your switch problems, but we've got teams that understand how this product works and interacts with other vendors. So it helps cut down the troubleshooting time, helps reduce the finger pointing, and we're able to provide concrete information in order to get the solution back to the way you expect it to be running.
Yeah, that's really important. I'll be honest with you. I spend more time calling them for maybe a severity one issue. And most of the calls are people forget their passwords because they don't log into the box. It runs and runs and runs. I legitimately had a customer, the first Tintri box I sold, I went out to see him. It was 4 years later. I said, "Did you ever upgrade your system?" He said, "Nope." I said, "How's it running?" He goes, "Honestly, it's almost like we forgot we had it. We haven't logged in. We haven't done anything." I said, "Well, let's do an upgrade." He goes, "All right, when do you want to do it?" "No, let's pick a maintenance window." I said, "We'll do it right now." He said, "Oh no, it's middle of the day. We've got virtual desktop." "Don't worry about it." I said, "We did it." So we spend more time trying to find the IP address of the box and find the login and password and getting that done than we did actually doing the upgrade. It went so
Wow.
smooth. But I mean, we rarely have to call them. Like I said, the majority of their calls, I think, are people forget their passwords. But in the rare occasion that we have, they do stay on the phone. And I told Brock yesterday, I said, "Look, these guys stay on the phone. They don't just say, 'All right, well, it's your switch, call us when you find something else.' They will follow up and they stay on top of it till it's resolved. They don't fix your switch, but they sure as heck can give people good pointers on where to look. And because they have experience in both ends. And I think that's important. They're just not like, well, it's beyond the cable from our device, so it's on you. They don't do that. And that's one of the reasons we love using them. I can't stand companies that do that and push past the buck. It drives me bananas. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to go off.
Yeah, and that calls to mind for me, and I know, Brock, you've got maybe something else you want to show us, but it calls to mind, I was at an event sponsored by a vendor where I was talking to the IT director from another organization that was there, and they had purchased one of the high-end storage array boxes because of the 6 nines guarantee kind of capability and stuff, and they had had a major failure that took more than hours to resolve. And as he was going up the chain, finally, one of the people on the call said to him, "Well, this will absolutely make it into our weekly data loss incident meetings." And he said, "What?"
Weekly.
Their weekly data loss incident meetings. So my question for you is, how frequently, Brock, does your team? I mean, how frequently does your data loss incident team meet?
That's not a frequent event at all. So it definitely, I heard that anecdote the other day and I cringed. I would not want to be a part of having to support a product like that. It sounds like a painful existence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Great,
we
thanks.
had a customer who couldn't get I'll say a big box product off the ground with 2 level 3 support engineers and the consultants that put it in, I don't know how many level 2s, for a year. And when I first presented putting a second Tintri in, he said, "It's great. I don't know if it'll fit our budget." And his IT guy was new and he said, "I let him do what he wanted." This big company came in and said, "We can do exactly what Tintri does for half the price." A year later, nothing was running. Matter of fact, it was so long, the VMware support for the year had run out. They didn't even have VMware loaded. They couldn't get it working. So I said, "Let me get you a VMstore. I'll fly down there. We'll have it up and running." We bought a VMstore, flew down there, and we wound up getting up and running in an hour. I mean, that was it. And they were up and running. And then the rest
Wow.
of the stuff became, I don't know what's maybe paperweights. I don't know. But I mean, those are true stories. And that's why I love it. I said,
Yep.
"Look, they tell you it's half the price. It's not. It's not. It can't do what it does. It has price, yes, but it can't do what they say they can do. Yeah, they can take snapshots. Everybody can do that. Oh yeah, they can connect to VMware or your hypervisor. They can do that, but nobody can do what the Tintri does." I stand behind that 100%. These guys know, because like I said, I get very animated about it.
Great, thanks.
All right, so next steps, definitely please reach out to any of your Tintri representatives. We've got a contact us link up here. We did provide some QR codes off to the right there for easier access. Ken, you want to take the DCIG statement there?
Sure. Yeah. Every week, DCIG publishes information about our research, and our top 5 reports are available also directly from our website, currently at no cost to the end user. And so we invite you, if you want to stay informed about what's happening in data protection or enterprise storage or cloud technology as it relates to those things, sign up for our newsletter. You get 1 email a week from us on that. And of course, you can always unsubscribe if you decide later you don't want, but we've got over 5,000 IT executives and frankly vendors and solution providers and VARs that are members on that our newsletter and find it valuable.
In other words, subscribe. It's awesome.
Yes, it's simple. Yep.
Just subscribe. It's awesome. QR code makes it easy. You can't say no to that.
There you go.
All right. Well, I think we're good to wrap it up. Wanted to say a big thank you to Ken at DCIG and Brock and Lou as well for joining the panel today. It's fantastic content. And just for everyone out there, again, hopefully by the end of the week, we'll have the on-demand version out to you with a copy of the DCIG report that we went over today. So thank you again for joining, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.